We now come to a very interesting panel discussion on supply chain management and third-party compliance. The supply chain forms an important part of any business, maybe however small the business is, and forms the backbone of that business. I would like to introduce our eminent panelists who shall give us a better insights on supply chain management as well as third-party compliances. It is my pleasure to invite our chairman, Mr. Arun Kulkarni, who will be the moderator for this session. Mr. Kulkarni is the chairman and the non-executive director of Legasis. Out of his 44 years of experience, Mr. Kulkarni has held leadership roles for over 36 years. His range of experience covers industries such as manufacturing, engineering, pharmaceuticals, trading, and the service industry. He also has a vast experience handling compliance and regulatory matters. Mr. Kulkarni is a mentor as well as an active member in the regional SME chapter of NASSCOM, Mumbai. Our panelists for this session are Mr. Anubhav Kapoor, Director of Legal Affairs, Ford India. As the Chief of Legal Affairs, Mr. Kapoor is responsible for legal, intellectual property, regulatory compliances and corporate governance practices and policies for the entire Ford in India. He has over 27 years of experience as an in-house counsel. He was listed as the world's leading general counsel in 2018 by Legal Era and as top 100 general counsels in India by Business World in 2021. And most recently by Business World magazine BW Legal Group as part of elite BW Legal World Top 100 General Counsels of India in February of 2021. We also have with us today Mr. Balfour Manuel, Managing Director at Blue Dart. Mr. Manuel has been a Blue Dart veteran for over 35 years and has been instrumental in the success of Blue Dart from the very inception of the company. A long-time employee at the company, Mr. Manuel, prior to his appointment as a managing director, served as the CEO of the company as well as the senior vice president in charge of Blue Dart's business-to-business customers. Joining us today, we also have with us Mr. Madhav Rao Uppuluri, the General Counsel at Tata Motors Limited. Mr. Rao is the General Counsel at Tata Motors, and prior to this, he has worked as a group legal head at 𝗕𝗊𝗵𝗺. He is industrious and energetic and carries himself with a rich and diversified experience in handling complex legal matters, especially matters relating to oil and gas. He is highly skilled in corporate law and comes with over 18 years of experience. Joining us today, we also have with us Mr. Vineet 𝗕𝗺, Global General Counsel, Tech Mahindra Group. Mr. 𝗕𝗺 is the business leader who provides tactical and practical vision that is vital in corporate decision making while preserving the overall legal health of Tech Mahindra and its group company worldwide. He possesses over 25 years of experience under various practice areas. He has also been part of the Tata Group and has worked closely with Tata Sons and Tata Services, which further provide his exposure to global deals and transactions. Now, I hand it over to you, Mr. Kulkarni.
I welcome members of audience to Compliance 1010 organized by Legasis. I also thank you for coming on Sunday, which happens to be everybody's leisure day. But we thank you very much for attending this program. For us, this is an event every year. We do it with all sincerity, and we believe that the programs deliver knowledge, programs deliver current topics, and program delivers what is required by the India Inc. Also, we also want to hear the experts from the industry leaders to talk about their views on the current topics or the topics of the importance during this event. The idea is to see that we celebrate compliance, and also share knowledge. Today, we are meeting this in this program. We are meeting for a very important subject as a panel discussion, and I'm fortunate to hold this discussion amongst the leaders of industry, from leaders of legal fields, from the across industry, and therefore it's going to be very interesting. I'm going to be facilitator more because I don't wish to lose time or don't wish to take any time from the experts who are going to give their views and topics. Before I said why we chose this particular topic for panel discussion, supply chain is a very, very, very critical sector in the industry. And it has been the driver for economies of most of the countries. In India, we have the Union Ministry of Commerce, which makes the data available for the industry. It had said much before the pandemic, which was announced on March 20 by WHO, that Indian logistics industry will grow at almost about 12% or 11%, which accounts to almost about $250 billion by rupee for dollar terms or for the rupee terms. This being a very important and driving force for the economy. Unfortunately, after March 20, 11th March 20, when WHO announced, the whole world was impacted with a huge impact of the disruption in the supply chain. And because of that, the entire world was coming to almost standstill. China was a major player to the world, which supplies important pharmaceutical ingredients, auto components, and the electronic components, which was again creating an havoc across the world. Around the same time, India was also trying to grapple with the situation. They were trying to find the local solutions, and somewhere now, after about 1 year or so, again the same Union Ministry of Commerce has come out with the expectation that the supply chain industry will grow to almost about $500 billion. Why? Because the supply chain of China got interrupted, people started looking for alternatives, and India was the best alternative people found. But were we ready for the, in terms of infrastructure? I think partly yes, partly no, because for transportation, what is required, the road and other infrastructure was getting ready. At the same time, we were not ready for the supply chain per se for the infrastructure, because we are all reliant completely on China by that time. As the statistics say, or the information say, almost about 18% of the imports are coming from China supply chain. To build this whole thing needs a huge amount of efforts from government and the operators. Today, it is seen, and Balfour may correct me if I'm wrong, the logistics cost in India is almost about 14% of the GDP. Globally, it's about 8%. Look at the gap between 8% and 14%, which is going to impact on the price a consumer is going to pay at the end of it. So to reduce the dependence on this cost-heavy operation, Government of India also has come up with various other schemes. Private companies have also come up with extremely innovative ideas. For example, Amazon went across and got over almost a huge amount of almost all cities in the country. They were trying to put their delivery centers. So also Flipkart, which is Walmart. So also Indian players, which were trying to do it across the country. To reduce the cost from 14% to 8% or below, to make the products at the end of it competitive. There are various views, but one of the main view is that you must reduce your cost. And if you are to reduce the cost, the best model practice across the world is relying on third party. The third parties are as big as any other player, but once you have the complex players coming into and many players coming into the operations, Obviously, there are various regulations that come into picture. They are local, they are global. For example, though of course it's not very relevant here today, the German government has come up with with an act where they say all the companies that are importing or exporting to Germany will have to follow certain norms which are very, very strict. India too has modified the laws of labor, etc. GST has of course helped in setting up the warehouses chain which were earlier to now simple operations. All this said is really putting pressure on the people who are in the business, which is in terms of complying of various laws globally also. If you are a global player, you have more complications, which is, the bribery, anti-bribery, and then cyber security. And of course, cyber security will be part of the infrastructure, but essentially bribery, anti-bribery laws are applicable. Therefore, there is a pressure on the people who are giving operations to third party. Without wasting much time in explaining more things, I thought I would take it over to the experts who are with us. They are experts in legal as well as business field and from the various industries. I mean, automotive to technology field to a pure play supply chain industry who have the warehousing to transportation to value addition in the supply chain. So I propose to do in this discussion is to go to each panelist by rotation, and then we'll have discussion on the points they have raised. I'm urging them to please put forward the challenge, how they are handling these challenges, what are the challenges that they expect to face, and what is the outlook for Indian supply chain in time to come. With these words, I would request Balfour, who is the Managing Director for pioneering supply chain company, and who today is one of the major sub player in the supply chain, to take over and please brief us about the third party compliances, overall supply chain issues that you're facing. And Balfour, I request you to take over, please.
Thank you, Arun, and my distinguished panelists here. So I take this opportunity. Thank you for giving a brief about what's happening. Yes, you're right. This industry is growing at about 10.5%, 11%. And some of the challenges which everybody knows, but I'll put it across, is definitely poor infrastructure, fragmented networks, and our logistics cost is very, very high. 14%, you're right. The government wants to take it to somewhere close to 8%. It's not very easy. This creates a competitiveness gap. And as you know, on the logistics performance index, we are 44th, and Germany ranks number 1 there. So, with that kind of a background, I would like to give you some breakup in the costs as well, in terms of what happens, how it gets divided. So the 14% gets divided by transport, 6%, that's the highest, warehousing, about 4%, inventory, 3%, and administration, 1%. So, you can easily pick out as to where, the cost efficiencies have to come. Transport happens to be the highest, followed by warehousing, then inventory, and then administration. So, kind of gives us a very clear-cut idea about, where we need to really push the buttons. Of course, the government is bringing in infrastructure in the form of roads. Almost 60% of our goods move by road. Air is hardly a small 1.5%, 2%. So there is a huge emphasis on creating good road infrastructure. But I believe among the road infrastructure also, the highways constitute a very, very insignificant percentage of the network. And that carries almost 40% of the tonnage in the country. So there is a lot that we have to do, but I think the government initiatives are absolutely on the mark in terms of enhancing India is a country with probably the largest, second largest road infra, about 5.5 million kilometers covered by road. Only 3% are covered by the highways. Now that makes it very significant area where the transport minister is working, on creating a network that will be world class. You've heard about the road infrastructure that is coming into place. But there are other modes of transport that have come to a standstill during the COVID. We had to struggle through the COVID. There was a weak consumer sentiment, job losses. All those things are challenges that we have to overcome. The supply chain disruptions where the maximum, if you ask my colleagues here, the supply chain was disrupted the maximum, but it also happens to be the segment that really recovered the fastest. I would say in the current year, the supply chain has been trying to come back to normal, breaking the low consumer sentiment, bringing back jobs, the raw material shortages, the chip shortages that you heard of, etc. We had other things like liquidity crunch, the labor and capital exodus that we faced, that had to be created. So as far as Blue Dart is concerned, I think very quickly, Arun, we had to overcome these challenges because the spread that we had in about 2,500 or 35,000 locations, but 2,500 facilities and very large manpower. Even during the middle of the COVID, we had about 20,000 people on the street. So health and regulatory became very critical. COVID protocols became very critical. Travel was absolutely shut down. It started with looking after business, then our people, moving to digitization, moving to, ensuring that, the service delivery cycle is set right. And just one more aspect that I want to highlight is we were able to use our assets in the right way, in the sense that we were able to sweat our assets. We are the cargo airline, the only cargo airline for since 1997 or so. We put our aircrafts to use to the government. And you mentioned imports are maximum from China. Our aircrafts were flying, it continues to fly and bring in supplies from China, Wuhan, and specifically almost every day we fly. So when the roads had gone down and there was no infra there, our aircrafts were flying on a day-to-day basis. So, I think we were able to perform the role of being a trade facilitator there, and we were able to perform that. So these are challenges which we faced almost, in a way that very few organizations will face. I mean, from the foot of Himalayas to Tiruvanthapuram, we have to service them all. So now I think we have the flight to quality has taught us as to where digitization has to go. And let me tell you, and most organizations talk about the revolution around the digital connect that we have been able to do. We have been able to do things in the last 1.5 years that were never on the front line. People are connected. We were able to bring in apps where almost 97% of our people have apps which they can talk to the organization, look at training programs, so on and so forth. I think I've said enough, but it has been a journey which has taught us the lesson of the century. Our couriers, our pilots, most importantly, what we learned is to look after our people became our biggest pivot. When the whole globe was grappling, we took the initiative of making sure paying the people, giving them COVID bonuses, giving them vaccination. By end of June, the whole of Blue Dart, somewhere in July, the whole of Blue Dart insourced and outsourced employees were vaccinated. Just to give you one idea, vaccinated completely, almost 40,000 people. So this is the kind of thing that we were able to do, but I think the COVID taught us the lesson. I will stop there if that is good enough and give my colleagues the stage. But Arun, if I have answered your question.
Yeah, Balfour, fantastic explanation of how you handled COVID. And as I know Blue Dart for long, it's one company which keep fighting against the odds, whether it's man-made or natural, and they have been serving. The question which I thought I will come back to you again afterwards is, how did you handle the compliances of, because I have to come back again to the compliance because this topic is going around compliances. How did you handle the compliances related to cross-border flying, which you are doing within India? You are doing contactless delivery. So how did you handle the digitization of the entire process? And what were the, in the cash crunch position, GST and other laws which are being very, very strictly implemented? How were you handling these issues? We'll come back once I take a round with other panelists. Now I will go to Madhav, who was Tata Motors legal head, and Tata Motors, as you know, is one of the leading automotive company. And I'm sure you also must have a large component coming from China, and like forgings and other stuff, perhaps even the auto components coming from China. So what were the restrictions you faced while importing those in the COVID times? And what about the other compliances related to labor, compliances related to Factories Act? Because things have changed. It's no longer going to be the normal. It's a new normal which we are facing. So I'll be glad to hear from you as to what did Tata Motors do to handle these challenges?
I think, thank you. First and foremost, good evening to all the panelists. I think, first and foremost, I think what COVID-19 reminded us is that it's our rich values and a larger purpose that drives the organization. What we do, how we do, what is the role that we play in the society at large are equally, important. And we are not just representing ourselves or the organization, but we are representing a broader legacy, the Tatas, right? So the onus of responsibility is significantly larger and more accentuated, if you like. Now, and another very important element is what the pandemic definitely reinforced is trust, and trust plays a key role. What does that mean? That means a very active engagement and involvement with the communities in which we operate. And how did we cope? Like every company, we focused on the very immediate need of focusing on safety, health, and well-being of the employees. We heard the panelists talk about vaccination. We implemented that across the company. At the forefront of our decision making was very clearly the well-being of our employees, and that was always a priority. And of course, COVID made it very urgent. What did we do during the downtime? Of course, on the compliances part, there have been ongoing compliances. There have been, of course, every industry went through challenges at that point of time, which is either labor shortage. There was clearly people were going back. There was safety and health, which was of primary concern for everybody. What did we do during the downtime? If you ask me, I would say we used that time also to rethink, redesign, and re-engineer. So, one of the points clearly is that we accelerated on digital technology adoption. Becoming more digital became very obvious. We designed and created virtual forms. There is a very interesting program called the Click to Drive, that we put that on the fast track. What that is basically, it's an end-to-end digital sales channel that lets the customers arrange everything in a contactless way. Test driving, financing, all the way to booking the car. So we invested in all of that, and that gave us basically reinstilled and reinforced that we play to win, but we also remain fit to compete and then play to win. So that's what we had focused on, and that's how we have worked through the pandemic.
Thanks, Madhav. I would like to know further, when once we again come back to you,
Yes.
is you have obviously a completely outsourced model for various components that you import,
Right.
you assemble in the product. So what were the challenges while doing, because most of them are SMEs, and SMEs were facing all sorts of problems from the pandemic, including the cash, including the labor, including working capital for them. And on that, when you are saying that you must comply with all the regulations which they need to follow, how were you handling this? I mean, one good thing which has happened in India is because of the digitization, even the compliances have become digitized more or less,
Correct.
because you are all customers of Legasis, and I know how brilliantly it is being done. So, because I must share here, just debating for discussion. I had talked with the compliance officer of Blue Dart the other day, and he was telling me that the digitization has been completely used, and this solution, which gives compliance results in digitized form, is even used in the board meeting.
Yes.
They have, if there are
Yes.
3,000 locations across, all the locations, all the regions were putting in their compliances through a software, and which was being shown to board of directors with a great comfort. So has that really helped us during the pandemic? I'm sure it is, yes. So, but besides that, other challenges which you may have faced with the outsourced companies, we can discuss it once I complete the round with Anubhav and Vineet.
Sure.
Now I go to Vineet, now I go to Anubhav, because he is a person, he is a stalwart from legal background with across industry spectrum. Like, he has worked with technology company, he has worked with the consumer company, he is now working with an automobile company. So he has all sorts of experiences of various industries. So I would love to hear from you, Anubhav, as to what did change during this pandemic, and again focus to compliance as to how did you handle the compliances.
Thank you, Arun. First of all, inviting me to the panel, and it's nostalgic because I was associated with the first edition of Compliance 1010, and this was kind of a landmark for us. And now we are on the 8th edition, which kind of is a testament that the whole program has made a place for itself in the industry, and it is a benchmark for compliances across professionals. And you were part of the journey in the early days where there were no separate professionals for compliance, right? And there was no separate software, and it was such a different world. And now when we are in the 8th edition, it's very happy to see that now the jobs get posted for compliance specifically, right? And there are so many softwares now that are in the market, and I think in some ways Legasis was the torchbearer or the lighthouse for all of that. So it's really humbling to see and be part of this forum of Compliance 1010 and be part of that journey. Coming back to the question, I think, and since we are focusing on third parties and suppliers, I think let me start with that during the pandemic times, there were 2 or 3 things which changed the entire perspective, right? Or was something that, anyway, pandemic was a black swan event and nobody had predicted it. So all of us landed in that unprepared, so to say. But there were certain things which helped us sail through it, right? And there are 3 things which distinctly affected the supply chain. The first one was the huge disruption in the demand and supply. As the waves kept on coming, there was a fluctuation in both the demand and the supply. Neither the suppliers could predict what the demand was, and neither the manufacturers could predict what the supply chain would look like, because in most of our industries, especially when you are in a manufacturing industry, it is an integrated ecosystem, right? A lot of the planning of the suppliers and your affiliates depend on the market demands, and both at this time were disrupted. So neither we could predict demand was, and neither the suppliers could plan how the production would be planned or will pan out. The second thing that happened was the flight of the laborers, right? And that was significant because in a manufacturing setup, manufacturing companies are highly leveraged with contract workers, right? And as the pandemic set in, the lot of these workers went away back to their hometown, and there were and that kind of almost brought a standstill. Lot of these smaller industries we were highly leveraged on these contract workers, and that increased somehow the entire risk of the supply chains on which the companies have depended. The last was the digitalization, right? While larger companies had adopted partially or fully digitization, the smaller suppliers were not into complete digitization, right? They still heavily dependent either on the software that the OEMs or the manufacturers had provided them, but on their own, they were mostly in their operations, especially the compliance part was in more of a physical form, or what we call as a non-automated form, right? So now what happened, given these three factors, I think let me address one by one each one of them. The first one, when the demand and the supply got disrupted, the first thing that got triggered was the entire financial and the physical disturbance, right? Many of these suppliers were not capable of maintaining their working capitals because their chain got broken. The banks kind of took away whatever they had, and then that whole cycle of business cycle could not go away, could not be run smoothly. So I think larger companies, and especially the company I was working at that time, we did provide financial packages and supported a lot of these companies, because at the same, while we call them third parties or suppliers, they are part and integral part of our ecosystem, right? We cannot operate seamlessly if they don't perform. So, and many times we call them partners, right? So we were partners to them in the time of distress as well, which basically meant we would provide them with financial assistance and support, or even advances to support their operations. And that also is partly, Arun, because it helped them comply with the regulations, right? You know, the principal liability that comes in when one of your contractor does not work, right, or does not comply with the regulations, then there is a liability that squarely falls on the principal employer, right? And many of the issues in that were partly also related to that, especially with respect to manpower supplies or manpower contractors, right? When the contractors started defaulting, we were squarely in the red. So partly it helped us by helping them to comply. The second part was the flight of the workers, right? And that is where I think there was that entire legal side of it, and also the humanitarian side of it, right? Which came into play, which I think Balfour alluded to in terms of providing the assistance at that point of time, not only for vaccinations, but providing them the necessary support to the families. And I think and that extended to our supply chain as well, right? And there was a lot of CSR that happened in the communities, that's not only of the company in which we operated, but also for the supplier communities that we were in. Again, it had something to do with all the norms that were being stipulated at that point of time for all of us, including social distancing, things like that. Because while we all knew we had to start production, there was no way we could compromise on the health and safety, both for our workers and equally for our supplier ecosystems. I think technology helped us not only educate But say, for example, if we, I'm sure you remember, we had these videos made, how does social distancing work? How does in a factory environment the social distancing would work? We didn't even know how that would even play out in a workshop floor, right? There was so much of education that kind of went across. And in fact, I'm thankful the companies came out of that competitive spirit and everyone collaborated to produce that whole education and including sharing of data and that percolated down to the supply chain systems as well. Coming back to the third one, which is basically the digitization, I think that was what really helped the legal departments, right? Immediately, wherever we had semi-automatic or semi-automation, we quickly scaled it up. Even simple things like signature of documents, stamp papers, execution of documents. In fact, there were new clauses added in the contracts which said when the pandemic got over, we will stamp it, because it was impossible to procure a stamp paper at that point of time, right? So, in fact, some of the new clauses got added where force majeure was all being discussed, and we started adding newer clauses into our whole contracting system was renewed. On the compliances, of course, thank God we had Legasis on our side, but we did extend Legasis to our suppliers in terms of we guided them how it could be done, and many of our suppliers also kind of adopted the similar system like we had. So and so forth. I think it was a phase where we promoted automation, not only within our company, but with our supplier ecosystem. I think a combination of all these three helped us manage. Apart from, there were other technologies that we adopted as well. Say, for example, surveillance, camera technologies, or CCTV kind of technologies, or remote sensing technologies like temperature for environmental compliances, things like that, which also helped us to comply in different legislations. I'll stop here, but when we dive deep into more specific areas, we can come up with examples how we leverage technology for compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Anubhav. It was very well said. And the point which you mentioned about force majeure is very, very well taken, because that was something which was not anticipated by anybody in the contract. You know, suddenly pandemic comes and the whole world comes to a standstill. I think where the legal minds work very well and arrived at what
I think it put the force majeure clauses. It made it a very serious clause for people to take note of.
Absolutely. Otherwise, it was one of the clauses, and nobody really bothered about it.
Yes,
but it did, and Anubhav, you brought it to the discussion. It's very nice. Now let me go to Vineet, because he is from the electronic industry. And the electronic industry is in so much in discussion now. Besides, of course, the software, the chips, which are now being, Prime Minister has to fly to USA to discuss about outsourcing it to India. So that is an importance. And I believe the entire technology is based on those chips, which are now being made available from IoT to whatever you say. So would like to hear from you, from your perspective of large experience in this industry. You know, technology is under pressure because of supply chain being disrupted. So how did you handle as an industry, and what are the challenges? Again, coming from the, I'm coming from the background of compliances. For example, in the pharma industry or from the vaccine industry, US passed a law in their own regime saying that certain components can't be exported to any other country, which had a reference to, I believe, Vietnam war or something. Now that was impacting India's vaccine production. So similarly, is the electronic industry getting affected for such regulations outside, and then you have to comply with them? And then coming to your outsourced agents, how are they complying with that?
Thank you, Arun. I think it's a pleasure to be here today, and it's a great panel. So thank you, all of you. to answer Arun, I think I'll slightly digress. I think let me just go back a little bit to the fact that, you would have seen, of course, not getting political, but we've had different agendas with the government talking about, and for a while now, talking about Make in India, Digital India, rationalization of laws. So all that has been there for a while now, and it had been moving, if you see. So it's been a journey. And as the fellow panelists said, the pandemic was not expected. It wasn't on cards. Nobody had ever thought that it would be of such a magnitude. We all thought it would come and go away. It will be there for a while and so. But what it has done really is the fact that, it pushed all of this in a pace that has been unexpected. We've had a vaccine in the market in a less than a year's time. Multiple phases went parallelly, which has never happened. So I think the industry had to rise, and rise is, the Mahindra tenant, one of the tenants that we talk about. So we had to kind of take up the challenge. And I think COVID has been the biggest disruptor. It has been the biggest transformer, so as to say. And one of the other, things that has happened is the fact that we've been talking about digitization, digital India, and that's been happening. But what it has happened in the last 1 year's time has been the fact that technology companies had two rules to play. One, we had to keep the industries running. You would have seen when you had this lockdown in the March 2020, one of the industries, the IT industries, was labeled as the essential services. Very unheard. Essential services definition we've looked at in a different format, in utilities and so on. So you had people appreciated, the governments across the world appreciated that IT, information technology, is the, is the collaborator. It is essential to run the industries, all forms of industries, be it banks, be it e-commerce, and this has to be the basis, and therefore it has to be in the category of an essential services, and you've got to move. So we got that advantage. And I think the IT, the information technology companies lived up to those promises. They really contributed well to industries and to see how, we could support. And I would say we've been a good collaborator partner to, the industries that we just talked about, Balfour, Madhav, Anubhav, all represent. So I think we've partnered well. We've helped them in technology upgradation journey. And as Anubhav just mentioned, the large players, of course, had invested. There were issues about investments, how much investment needs to go into upgrades and, going digital and so on. But these smaller players had no choice. I think within a matter of weeks and months, everybody had to, move to a new regime. Poor infrastructure, higher costs, as we just talked about, were there. But at the same time, there was a requirement to automate. There was a requirement to bring technological revolution, so as to say, in the, supply chain industry as such. And I think that's gone well. So that's something that I would like to touch upon. And, we've been forthcoming. I think it also gave opportunity, if you ask me on a lighter note, to information technology industry as such to, they have actually seen the best of they're actually seeing the best of their times in terms of, digital revolution that's happening all across. But I think we really have contributed as an industry, as a force to all the industries that we touch upon, and see how we, bring the ease of not only doing the business, but also, how do we automate and move it faster. Lastly, I think there is a CSR piece also that I think all of the fellow panelists mentioned. So I think no industries would shy away from that, responsibility. So I think this was not just important from a doing business perspective, but also important that we give it back to the society and keep the, be honest to our stakeholders. So I think, and it is in this context that I would like to emphasize for a fact that, compliance, and go back to the compliances, and me as our company as a, a partner to the whole ecosystem here when we talk of different industries. So compliance has been an important aspect. I think the industries that I represented, and we've been with Legasis. We started when we just Legasis had just started, and I think we were also amongst the first ones to contribute. And I feel pride in certain changes that we requested and were adhered to, and so on. I think at that point in time in the corporation that I worked for, we worked in about 75 jurisdictions, and you can understand the jurisdictions will have their own nuances around the laws that apply to the corporation which does business there. Today also we continue to be in about 75 or 80 jurisdictions where our customers are. So the regulatory framework is very important, and therefore as a partner or as a player within the supply chain, we need to be sensitive about the fact that there is a compliance to laws, there is a compliance to ethics, there is compliance to there should be zero tolerance, so as to say, to non-compliances. And therefore, I think this compliance and this whole agenda and the whole practice that Legasis runs really is very important. I think the corporations had adopted to it. We work in, I would say we work in situations where you have sanctions, as you just mentioned. There are sanctions about individuals that you can work with. There are sanctions about countries where you can operate, where you can procure, where you can deliver. So I think all of that is part of the ecosystem, and we need to be sensitive about it. So, compliance, cost, is it going to increase the cost? No, not for me. I think it's about reputation. It's about treating your, your stakeholders fairly. And so therefore compliance becomes an important part and parcel of the regime, so as to say, not just the supply chain. Of course, I emphasize on that as well. But for any industries, I think compliance really has a very crucial role to play. And I think we're all here sitting and, talking, but we practice very highly about, ensuring compliances at our organizations.
Thank you, Vineet. Indeed, I think India Inc. is really resilient because we have seen various regimes of governance, and all through that, India Inc. has always been standing with the ethics and the compliances. I'm also very happy to say here that, I had an opportunity to work with Anubhav and Tata Motors then very closely when we were in this compliance business, very new. We were just trying to emphasize on people, saying that compliance is a must, and therefore a compliance solution done transparently would help the business to grow. And I'm extremely proud to say here that these are the people. I mean, today Anubhav is sitting here, and I know how he handled, and Vineet, of course, you did, and you gave us inputs in putting it together. And Tata Motors, of course, was the same. I mean, Tata Motors started us with saying that you must go and try the Lucknow plant first. If you succeed there, everything will be successful. And I know it was a great support that we received. And of course, now, as I mentioned, compliance officer of Blue Dart saying that, we show you the board entire compliance and non-compliances on all areas of the work, from the outsource agent to their own facility. I think it makes a big satisfaction at the end of it that we have been able to do something. The point which I also make today, despite the pandemic and despite the negative perception that was around, the latest news says that India collected 1.17 lakhs on GST. It's a huge contribution from the industry. I mean, giving this GST in this trying time shows, and that also shows how this system is collaborating with compliance regime, and compliances are happening. Now, I would make a quick reference to everyone. Balfour, you have a large chunk which is outsourced, and when they come to our doors, we don't even realize they are from the outsourced agent. They just behave like what you have done. So tell us, what did you do to make them comply with what you are doing? I mean, what is the secret of this happening?
Yeah, thank you for that, Arun. But I think both my panelists, Anubhav, Vineet, covered so brilliantly, and Madhav, that I don't have to speak about it, but I'll go straight to the yes, a large number of people we do outsource, but they are absolutely, first of all, their take homes are almost equal to what an employee in Blue Dart will get. It starts with that, so there is no differentiation when they work together, handling similar or different kind of jobs. So there is no, distinguishing between very often I would not know who's an outsourced employee and who's a direct employee. The second thing is, I think the communication channels are very critical. Like I said, the app that covers everybody on their handphone, they get all the information. There's another thing that, I don't want to keep saying about Blue Dart, but there is something called performance dialogue. So, a performance dialogue is supposed to be every morning you meet and you say, hey, this is what is happening. This is happening on the external world. It's happening on the internal world. By the way, your performance on this route, so on and so forth. So they are quite, and very often my colleagues who get deliveries through Blue Dart come in comment saying that this guy who delivered was very knowledgeable. And I tell my CFO or my company secretary, you know what? He's an outsourced employee. Oh, wow, he's an outsourced employee. I can't believe it. So, I think that's the way it works. But one or two interesting aspects. Yes, as an organization, we started with a DNA just like Tata's and others. And I would like to mention on this that, the late J.R.D. Tata also advised us once, free of cost, as to what our aviation structure should be. We had gone with him with a plan for some 100 small aircrafts. And he just said, drop all this, go for this type of aircrafts. And that's what made us successful. Today, a crescent route in the country, people laughed at us. But yes, so, we learn from each other. I'm still learning. But to just make something, mention something interesting, Arun, compliance was really a big thing always. But I have this office in city, close to the Ross Cinema, the Churchgate area, where once I went and our compliance was all over the wall. One whole wall was full of notices saying we comply to this, we comply to this, we comply to, all the laws. And I said, do you have to mention? No, our compliance guy has mentioned these were all to be displayed, because otherwise when the officer comes, he doesn't see it, then we are in trouble. So, but when Legatrix came, I think it really helped us a lot to digitize the whole thing. It started with, how are we going to do it? But I think it helped us tremendously. My company secretary will vouch for it, and his team, the legal team, that it has been the greatest help for us in complying, because the number of locations we serve, to comply in all those locations, it became very useful. So having said that, also one good word about, we also have a RISE. Of course, Mahindra came first, but our RISE stands for revenue increase from small enterprises. And that also helped us a lot. And, there are some global vision of this organization. We belong to the DPDHL group. So, it says connect and improve lives. And the pandemic really showed us, because we connect to millions of people every day, we were trying to improve their lives. And I think that made our employees, work more with a mission and vision and so on. Otherwise, we did lose lives, but the mission continued. So, I think all of my panelists said the sense of purpose, the digitization, never before. What was 3 years later came in 3 years before. And, we kind of, so coming back to, so compliance on, also one more thing that happened, Arun, your earlier question was about how did you deal with compliance on your international flying? We are highly regulated as a listed company and by DGCA, BCS, so on and so forth. But one element came about was that we worked with the government, the Ministry of Aviation, MOCA. So things were much easier. We were able to fly faster. Everything was being taken care of. But we learned our lessons. I mean, the first or second flight to Wuhan It was a lesson. We were scared that our pilots would get stuck there and then they would be quarantined. So we had to leave faster than before. We had to leave some thing behind, go back to fetch it, so on and so forth. So good learning, but now it's almost a daily feature. But having worked with MOCA made our life easier. And one more thing I want to say is being a compliant organization, Arun, helped us a lot. The local governments were helpful. You will not believe it. We used to get a call from, who's who and ask us, is there any problem with you? I must tell you, the police force in Mumbai, some very senior person would call us and ask us, do you have any problems? And unbelievable. I mean, this is something that, probably because they believe we are a compliant organization, we were doing a purpose. And initially, we had trouble. We had to put huge stickers in front to say, like Vineet ji mentioned, that we are essential services. Gentlemen, we are essential services. That kind of a thing. But over a period of time, I think people got the ID card would be recognized and so on. So being a compliant organization, I think helps. That is what I want to leave it. Recently, we piloted a drone delivery, again, we worked with the Telangana government and we delivered vaccines. And the Telangana government, the initiative that they took, the Ministry of Aviation, the minister was there, 𝗕𝗫𝗺𝗃 Scindia was there. The amount of emphasis they are giving to new initiatives, it's really, really, kind of changed the environment completely. It's allowing us to run with it. And now we hear there are 35 organizations who are in queue to launch their drones. So, I think it's a great revolution that has happened during the pandemic. I hope the speed and the urgency of making this, an alternate market. Of course, the Vietnams, my colleagues mentioned, the Vietnams and other countries are moving, Taiwans are moving faster. But I think there is an amount of reliability that comes on Indian goods. And I think we have a huge promise there. And I think we are moving there. But being compliant makes life easier. And I think that is what I wanted to convey, Arun. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, Balfour. That's why Blue Dart is a major player in the Indian, South Asia rather. Thank you. Now we go to Madhav.
Arun, I am very cognizant of the fact that I am dealing with on the panelists, much more compliant organizations and people who run that. But I just wanted to tell you, eager to tell you about the experience we went through, because you got to operate in, thousands of networks every day. And how do you get through that? But every regulatory agency stood up and supported us. This is really a new experience that we face. Thank you.
In fact, Balfour, just to add,
the message I think is, if you follow the law, the law enforcement will support you. They will not come and harass you.
Absolutely.
Yes, Vineet,
No, I meant the same thing, Balfour. I think absolutely right. I think it's all about the respect that you gain. You may spend in the initial run, they call it the compliance cost or whatever, but I think the dignity and the respect which it comes with is tremendous. And I know you rightly said, when the pandemic had hit, regulators, if we were in a regulatory environment, I think the way they came and the kind of support they extended was tremendous. And I think that's led to this change. And, and I think your organization anyways was delivering anything to wherever, all over the world, so I think you had multiple barriers and challenges. And I think to overcome must have been new circular every day, new rule changing every day, new relaxation happening every day. So I'm sure it was quite a challenging environment, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's come out.
And I think it also percolates down. It's a tone from the top, right? Each of the boards have also, I must say, played they've stepped out of being absolutely community centric, not just looking at a particular issue in a particular time zone, but boards have played a fantastic and a remarkable role in terms of leading the tone from the top, as they would call it.
True. Just to add the complications which Balfour may be facing is, the Supreme Court's judgment on this overloading payload of the trucks. If you overload the truck, your truck gets just confiscated, your goods get confiscated. That was for safety of people, of course, but a lot of unorganized people are not doing that. And managing such a vast network, it's a great job. Anubhav, would you want to say the last words here?
Sure. I think it was wonderful hearing all the panelists, because it was making me nostalgic that while for 2 years we are at home operating, but this is what we went right through. Every day new circular, and the legal teams were on a hyper mode to support the management. I thought it was one of the period in almost my 30 years that where I felt more fulfilled, that I was helping organization to be more compliant, right, every day, and helping them go through a crisis, which was and which nobody could predict. So I did want to resonate the same thing, that the compliant organizations who had a reputation of compliance and being on the right side of law were rewarded. And it was quite obvious in this times of crisis that the government extended full trust to these organizations and supported them equally. So it in fact reinforced the entire concept that compliance does pay. It's not about the money that is required to comply. It is about the reputation. And I think since we were discussing the 4 things, I think the whole compliance thing not only helps us be more regulatory compliant, but also it improves the reputation, which is basically the thing that we are all working for, right? Today, if we associate ourselves with organizations who are compliant, it does underline a whole confidence that we come out with, and that we are representing compliant organizations who respect law. And also our ecosystem is compliant as well, because our systems don't allow our partners and ecosystems also to be non-compliant. I think that's the confidence and the advantage of being compliant yourself, because none of the ecosystem itself can point fingers at you. And of course, see, there are so many other advantages that it prevents you from business disruptions. Your third parties kind of are more happy because they know that you are a straightforward organization. They become your ambassadors to promote business, and there are therefore more financial gains as well that come in the process. Compliance, I think, has taken its center seat during the pandemic. Like I don't remember ever any situation before. Compliance became the centerpiece, and every organization wanted to be ahead of the game and not flaunt the law. So I think so it's a good thing. While it was challenging, the pandemic was challenging, but as professionals, we learned a lot. And on the tools itself, Arun, you would know that compliance is translated into regional language. We have integration with automated devices, right? We have cameras which can directly give us important compliance information. Say, for example, social distancing in all our factories. The factory manager used to send us a video, right? Whether the fire extinguishers are being renewed or not, the fire compliances, there used to be pictures uploaded in Legatrix, right? So I think we have also come a long way in form of compliances, and how we are starting to produce data which is meaningful for the organization and helping it to take decisions. And there can be no better example than pandemic, I must say, because the agility of the organizations were because of the legal departments and the compliance department, because they analyze the information faster, quicker, and give them some very productive and good inputs for them to operate every day. It was an everyday situation for all of us. So no complaints at all as far as compliance is concerned.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, we are all part of the same fraternity. So we want to be compliant.
On a lighter note,
Yeah.
I think the panelists here who are sitting in the seat on compliance can get a better night's sleep because it's a compliant organization that you're.
I know. I know. Plus, with this new Consumer Protection Act, which will have, if you are compliant with from the manufacturing beginning procurement to supplying the final good, if you comply, you automatically comply with this Protection Act. So
Absolutely.
It was
And
wonderful.
Madhav, you make a good point because, see, it is the first time we saw the humanness in the government organizations as well.
Yes.
Right? Never ever we had seen they are extending the dates of compliances. They are helping us comply, right? The whole attitude where it was like a hound dog kind of attitude that I'm going to penalize you, it became suddenly supportive, right? And it was a big change that happened, right? And I think kudos to the entire government machinery. The change of attitude was very, very welcome.
Absolutely.
It
It reflects from the collection of GST, as I was mentioning sometimes.
Correct.
Otherwise, you imagine the regime of sales tax, how difficult it used to be. I mean, they used to be always running short of deficit, and people were reluctantly doing it. But as we in Legasis, we say one of the themes of compliance 1010 was compliance by choice. Compliance is not by force; it has to be by choice. And I think that culture is spread across, and I'm happy that we are part of that whole journey. And this.
Yeah, I can second that. That is, creating awareness, creating those sensitization sessions. People who, when you map people to do compliance within the organization, when they change, the whole investment on sensitizing, holding their hand and getting them to walk that path of compliance is a continuous process, right? And it is, and you can strengthen it on a daily basis. You can strengthen it by giving the feed, and which Legasis does for us, providing us the appropriate and timely feeds. You strengthen that compliance. It's a lifetime journey on compliance, and every compliant organization undoubtedly has wonderful rewards. We started this by saying tight budgetary constraints and targeted costs, but the cost of non-compliance is huge.
Non-compliance is very high.
And Madhav, just to add, I think we have these anti-corruption laws that we talk about, and these are beyond the jurisdictions, and of course the laws in Germany and France that we Arun and Balfour just mentioned. I think they can just throw an organization out of business actually, and you could be exposed to some percentage of your global revenues. And also lastly, I think we are also moving in the times when we are talking of environmental laws and the social governance and all of that stuff, sustainability and responsiveness back to the society. So I think compliance, there is no choice actually. It is the order of the day. You need to follow it. If you have to survive, grow, not grow. I think if you have to sustain in business, you have to be a compliant organization, and I think there is no choice actually. So
and also the investors who would come into India, they would look for this very much, besides doing ease of business, etc. But if your compliance level is high and your regulatory regime is supporting you, it makes life easy for them to invest. If you're looking for an alternative to China as a manufacturing hub and a supply chain, this is going to be a long way. It will help us.
I can tell you in the last couple of years, companies like Fords and Tata Motors and Blue Darts, etc., the kind of questionnaires that they send out to their vendors, partners is amazing. I, as an IT company, being part of the IT company for a while, it's so much of data which is asked, and which is actually good, if you ask me, because you want to be sure that you are working with the right people, you are with the right partners actually, and it not only is important for these stakeholders or your investors, but you want to be having the right ecosystem. You have the right people, right mindset, and right compliant and ethical people that you work with. I don't think there is a choice. I mean, we go through these labor and environment and thousands of questionnaires, and which is important to my, and I think that's very important for future of businesses. And
I'll just supplement to what you're saying, Vineet. I think one is, of course, to assess the vendor, but also, that once we collect that feedback, there is an assessment that we also put ourselves to, right? Because there is a full-blown analysis that goes on internally as to how the compliance department is run. Are you actually putting in the places, the right processes? Are you asking these questions? How many people are you getting on board? So the compliance teams also, as well as the entire organization, is also under a continuous. That's why I said it's a continuous learning process for all of us. So it's while, yes, the vendors are given those assessment sheets, but also internally we have metrics where the internal organization is also assessed equally and with much more rigor.
True. And it's the process. Arun, we do it to our vendors as well. So
yeah. And Arun, the interesting part is if during the pandemic we didn't slow down. India saw even moving forward on so many legislations, right?
Very true. I mean, that is amazing. I think
which is much more stringent than the older act, right? The whole medicine regime changed, right? The industry went from a straight transition from BS4 to BS6 without a blink of an eye, right? We are in the middle of a pandemic, 1st April 2020. These are no small changes, right? So I think that is only possible when you have the confidence and the systems to handle compliances in a way which gives you that confidence. Otherwise, businesses would shake up.
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, you imagine if we didn't have the digitization by now, we would have been in big trouble.
Surprise, the ports have also now adopted it and so convenient. People realize today that it's, you can, and also councils, it's so easy. You're on the phone, you can see so many, you can actually, appear before, multiple courts. So digitization, even in the judiciary, is very welcome.
Absolutely. Right.
Vineet, otherwise, how would you send all your thousands of employees working from home? And you did the ISP guidelines, right? And it was good. And there was so much of concern on data protection by the customer. It was a constant journey of education, technology, upgrading the cybersecurity regimes. I think very, very fulfilling journey if I sum it up.
Yeah. Also, I think this has taught one thing because I'm on the study board of a law university, and where we come across students, and they are now want to be a business manager as well as a legal manager. It's not just going to be just legal mind. It's going to be completely changed.
Arun, you are opening a new topic, I think.
Absolutely.
The legal managers, board members, and decision makers. That's a sensitive topic for most of us here.
I agree.
But you're right.
I think I must end this, but before that, I must say I'm saying it in the alphabetical order: Anubhav, Balfour, Madhav, and Vineet. Thank you very much. Your inputs were absolutely valuable, and I enjoyed talking to you because, as I mentioned in the beginning, my aim was to gain maximum out of you, and I think I got it more. The time is short, but we can meet again offline sometime and discuss and keep on doing that. Thank you very much for attending this. It shows your implicit faith in the cause for which we are doing. And I once again thank from the heart, from the Legasis behalf. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Arun sir, for this lovely opportunity. Hello, panelists. My name is Disha and I'm a certified compliance consultant working with Legasis since a year now. Being my first C1010 event, I am really delighted to be a part of such panel discussions where all giants of a particular industry have been, with such experiences have been spreading knowledge. So there have been a couple of questions that we have got. I would like to curate, we have curated 4 to 5 questions out of those, which I would like to address to this panel. May I, with all due permission?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Thank you so much, sir. So the first question reads this way. In the context of the pandemic and the subsequent lockdown, what are the latest and emerging innovations that are being looked at in the logistics industry? Secondly, is the logistics or supply chain industry headed towards a major shift?
I'll take that, Disha. So some of the things, I'll be very short on that. Some of the things that have really come of age is prediction through artificial intelligence, which is used to be, not so popular, but now it requires, because everybody is working from a virtual environment. The blockchain technology, for example, communicating between multi-parties, manage very complex transactions, that is happening. IoT is taking, Internet of Things is taking, the benefit of, being used in our hubs, warehouses, etc., where, the machines talk to each other or one equipment talks to the other. And robotics, I would say robotics, again, in an area where, there are tasks which are more simpler tasks going to the robots, and the things where you need to really complex, thinking related going to humans. So more of the laborious tasks going to robotics. It's already in play in many organizations. It's already in play in the warehouses and so on, but going to another level where, you have, it's not happened in India. In India, drones have happened. But that application will be on a site to site or something, but there are machines delivering in UK and other places. Machines are, the globe, the pandemic has been global, right? So machines have started delivering, just unmanned vehicles have started going and delivering to homes and so on and so forth. So to some extent that has come to fore in India also. We have applications that will tell us which route to take based on, we have kind of, put in a GPS location, and then the vans are equipped to say, some of our vehicles are equipped to say which route to take first, so that you can get a priority delivery before business day and so on and so forth. So a lot of that coming into fore, I guess, short and sweet. Most of these things which we thought would come 4 years or 5 years from now, have really come to fore in the last 1.5 years, or 18 months or 24 months. That's where I would leave it.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much.
Is there any legal, are there any legal issues associated with the developments which is saying, like, the data privacy or, the permits required to use these vehicles, or permit required? What are the other regulations? Do anyone think about it?
Yeah, so data privacy, yes, for sure. Transferring of data, encrypted, so on and so forth. We have to comply to information in terms of how we transfer information one place to the other. But when it comes to internal use of robotics, etc., no, we did not face those kind of regulatory, but when it came to drone, it took us about almost 2 years where, the compliances had to be put in place. But like I mentioned earlier, when you have a government-private partnership, all those things get ironed out much more easier. But yes, there are...
Why ask these questions in good old days when these walkie-talkies were being used? The frequencies were being sold by Ministry of Telecom. Yes. And then if you discontinue that unit, you have to destroy with a particular procedure and then hand it over to government.
Yes, absolutely right.
I do not know what happens today.
So absolutely right. The only thing is the Zooms and the Teams and Microsoft Teams and the WebExes have kind of taken over the platforms of communication. So, virtually everybody is on some platform or the other. So there we did not have, like everybody else, I think things are getting much more streamlined.
No, but my lawyer friends will tell Zoom faced some class action.
Yes.
Just to add, not exactly, we are emerging. A lot of things, these are emerging areas. So you would see the regulatory framework would follow. We've seen things like e-commerce, drones, and stuff like this. So I think the framework will be in place. And I think the government authorities are working closely to bring a formal, structure and the framework actually. I think the technology is moving so fast and so is the requirement. And I think somewhere down the line, we've seen in a couple of industries, the laws and the framework came in later. But I think it's a work in progress.
And just to supplement on a lighter note again, I think the speed with which legislations and regulations got introduced at the age of walkie-talkies versus today's age, there's a phenomenal difference. There is a lot of speed with which the governments, the courts also intervening and quickly addressing issues. I think the speed has just picked up so much. So as Vineet rightly said, I think these are all emerging. So you will find legislation quickly catch up. There is no legislation today.
True. Yeah, Disha. Next.
Moving on to the next question. How has the automotive sector coped up with the pandemic, given that the total sales of commercial vehicles declined about 20% during the previous final year?
Quickly, I think, how did we cope with the pandemic? Community engagement, as I said, we focused because they are all a part of the ecosystem. Suppliers are a part of the ecosystem. They are part of our community. We are partners, as we had said, as the panelists also spoke. So engagement with the community, that is very, very clear. That's, walking with them, holding each other's hand and walking through the pandemic time. Second, I think focus on digital play. And I think before that, I would say health and safety of the employees, as I had alluded to earlier. Health and safety of the employees being very, very paramount. And also the other stakeholders in the ecosystem, everybody. So, we've kind of partnered on many initiatives there. And third, I would say is digital play, focus on digital technology. Those are the three things definitely, that we could cope with the pandemic and walk out of it.
Yeah, no, well said, Madhav. I think since Disha, you asked very specifically about the commercial vehicle industry, commercial vehicle did take a lot of hit, right, during the pandemic, and for obvious reasons, right, because the supply and demand disruptions happened. There were restriction on movements. States also put restrictions. So obviously, the entire logistics industry itself was disrupted during that time, and companies did see a drastic fall in their volumes when the first wave hit, and then when we were just about to recover because of the domestic demand, it again fell down. But what I should also reflect is that during this time, there were certain very obvious challenges that the industry came through, which is commendable. One, I did mention about the whole transition from BS4 to BS6. It was no small change. It was the entire change in the technology that has happened, which had direct impact on the environment itself, right? The whole axle load norms, the load carrying norms for the trucks were changed. It was not a small thing. The freight prices fell down while the cost of the vehicles were more. We were deploying more expensive technology on the trucks, but the cost itself of the freight had gone down. So the industry went through some very, very challenging times, and coupled with that, the diesel cost went up, right? So, yes. So I think all this added together, it affected the commercial vehicle industry. But what is good is that now we are seeing the demand coming up, again. I think the rural demand has picked up. And again, the supplies have started again across the country, and the pent-up demand is there. So we are expecting the whole thing to bounce up in the commercial industry, but I did want to mention that it went through a very rough patch during the last year, but for good. It met a lot of challenges as well, and many of them were regulatory in nature.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Moving on to the next question. India has been ranked at 44th number by World Bank currently. What are the key challenges faced in logistics management in India, and how can we improve our logistics and supply chain capabilities?
I may just give few points in this is
Yes.
now the government of India is expecting almost about 160% increase in the warehousing space. I think what India is lacking is an organized warehousing. The plan is to make 35 million square feet of warehousing available. I think that is going to be a challenge whether the private companies would be able to handle. A company like Blue Dart or DHL can set up large warehouses with modern warehouse management systems, which so that the inventory management is handled pretty well, and also given the the on-time delivery has to be handled. That is something which perhaps would come, but more Balfour is the right person to talk about it because he heads that industry.
Yeah, so, in the earlier panel discussion, I had said that, infra and, infrastructures is something that really plays a key role, and the government is taking efforts. There's a logistics policy, there is a aviation policy, and like I said, there are dedicated freight corridors that are coming up. It's not that the government is not, some of my panelists said that legislations and finally the push to take logistics to even reduce the logistics cost from a 14% to 8%, is moving faster. But it is distributed between transport, warehouse, administration, and inventory. Between these four parts, it is divided. Transport taking the highest, and then followed by warehousing, inventory, and then administration costs. So it's not just one area that needs to be, but the larger part is the transport part, which is fuel efficiencies, fuel being lost. Of course, EV is a new initiative, which has again got like some of my panelists said, there is a policy that kind of EV vehicles are seen now all over. I mean, somebody sent me an EV vehicle today from Bangalore. I said, well, even in a city like Mumbai, the public transport is going EV. So I think the government is doing things much faster, like all of us have learned during the COVID. I think it's speeding up, and I think that effort to go, that competitiveness that we face, the competitive pressure that we face from developed countries on the cost will go down step by step, but albeit much faster than what it should have. The COVID has really kind of scaled this initiatives. And like some of my panelists said, virtually everybody is moving in a very compliant manner there. So I believe there's a lot happening there, good things happening, and I think the journey is in the right direction.
Sure, sir. Thanks.
Also, Balfour, I think that's the right move with the government as well. Because the warehousing is and infrastructure are the basic for even developing some of the industries, right? I used to be the head of legal for Domino's many years ago, and we would struggle with cold chains, right? How do you transport cheese from one corner of the country to other, right? There were no, and it was a struggle, and the entire emphasis on food processing industry is much dependent on cold storage, warehousing, and cold chains, right? So I think if this infrastructure gets developed and we have roads which can carry heavy loads, I think many of the industries will also develop, which is the need of the hour, right? So I think it's a good move that is happening, and obviously companies are for it.
Hopefully, sir. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question we have is, with e-commerce in the rise and the demand of same-day delivery being on the upwards, the concept of in-city warehousing has picked up. What are the challenges of establishing in-city warehousing, especially in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities in India?
I will take it and then move to the colleagues. Yes, cost is one thing, of course, in city, and it also means there's a hub and spoke kind of an operation. If it's a same day delivery, it's not that you can pick up from one point and run to the other point. That doesn't work. You got to have mini and micro hubs in the cities, and that is going to take the cost up. So people have to burn money, burn cash to get, to a level of demand that will get your valuation higher, so on and so forth. But, some of the, Tata's foraying very big. My colleague, panelist will tell you they are going big time onto retail, e-commerce, e-tail. They have a footprint there. So I think a lot of things happening. And then grocery deliveries also, it really needs to have micro, but the challenge is cost. And of course, space in cities, doesn't come easy, doesn't come cheap, but that needs to be done. It cannot be run but then technologies, like I mentioned, Disha, there are, it's leading to, exchange, rerouting of vehicles directly from the field, so on and so forth. There's a lot happening there. Particularly in developed countries, it is moving faster. But even here, so there is a back-to-back transfer. You don't need to come back. People are finding new ways to ensure that, the 2-hour limit or 4-hour limit or same-day deliveries are working. But yes, I think cost, burning cash is definitely one of the challenges that we face there. Yeah.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Moving on to the last question. Engagements with a third party are a major function of most businesses. While general due diligence is a part of the onboarding process, what should the corporates take care of in order to make the third party aligns with their mission and vision?
See, there are 4 risks that are at a very high level that are associated with the third party environment. One is the entire risk of business disruption. And these are all double-edged swords, right? If you have good partners, it will help you grow the business as well, right? But if your partners are not good, and if you have not taken enough care, then you do run a risk of business disruption if one of your partner does not perform the way or doesn't give you the quality that is required. The second is the reputational. Since it's now integrated manufacturing, a lot of companies depend on other partners and third parties for performing their core functions as well. The reputation of your partners and outsourcing agents correspond to your reputation as well. If some of your partners don't do well, it causes a huge reputational risk. I'm sure you are aware of the entire episode of Nike where they had laborers working in Bangladesh and it hit the roof, right? The global company had to shut down its operations because it didn't have good labor conditions in which their products were being manufactured. So issues like that keep on coming, and therefore it has a huge reputational risk. The last third one is the financial risk. If your partners are not well managed, or if they don't manage their finances and their sanctions properly, it can indirectly cause a risk to you. And it is an important part of financial due diligence. And last and the most important is the regulatory. If your third parties don't perform, are not compliant, it is a reflection of our processes, and it is also creates a lot of risk on the prime contractor. So I think if we see these 4 risks, most of the due diligence questionnaires are probing into these 4 areas, right? And the companies just want to ensure that they are well covered under these 4 risks. So most of the questions that were alluded to earlier, the long questionnaires that Vineet kind of said are all around these 4 areas, whether it is data protection or contract labor or sourcing. These are the 4 high-level risks that these questionnaires cover.
And maybe just to add, Anubhav, I think third party, it looks like, third party means, you can easily distance, as you just kind of emphasized. Third party in today's business cannot be somebody that you disassociate and throw and use and so on. And I can talk from a perspective of global laws. There are so many laws which govern the vendors that you onboard, and the risks and the legal requirements that are associated under the laws which you need to fulfill to have a third party in place. So there is a regulatory framework, and you need to be compliant thereunder. So therefore you can't just simply shun for a fact that this is a third party. And I don't know, I mean, there's an example. Yeah. I can't forget a very important incident of 9/11. And I was probably at Amex at that point in time. And the then managing director said, while the people who were on the rolls and who lost their lives could be counted, but what about the so many people who were third party and, others who kind of came into the World Trade Center and lost their lives? How do we count them? And it touched me, it was a fact. And I'm talking of almost about 20 years ago. So the world's moved considerably. So therefore, third party is something that is you. And as you rightly pointed out, there are so many risks associated, and therefore you need to have a framework, a proper structure in place, and maybe, I would add a zero tolerance policy, so as to say. You need to have a top-down approach on compliance, be it yourself and your third parties that you associate with. And, probably you do your sanctions and other database and other checks on the kind of people you engage with. You have to be sure that you're dealing with the right people, or else you could be, caught somewhere in as a exporter or as a domestic producer or as a user somewhere in the world. You will be caught somewhere. So I think there is this regulatory, financial, and many other risks that come with it. So a whole holistic approach and a broad-based approach needs to be taken, and not just a evasive one that I've ticked in the box and that this works. So it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and just to add to what both Anubhav and Vineet said, in letter you may call it third party. Lawyers can draft and put all the distances, but in spirit, as Vineet rightly said, it is you. Right, it is nothing but you, because they are an integral part of the ecosystem working. It's just you that is actually there. So the spirit of it is, the compliance rigor is paramount. It applies equally as much as it applies to third parties. It applies to us as well. So I think it's in that sense to be looked at.
Completely agree to it.
And Vineet, you made such a good point. See, if an incident happens in a cab which is carrying your employees, nobody points to the cab driver or the cab company which provided you. It always is about this was this company's cab, right?
True. I 100% agree. The small vendors will never, the vendor or partners or third party will not make it to the news. The news will be, the larger partners. So you have to be very careful about what you do and how you select and process it.
Absolutely. I think my compliance head keeps, he starts his presentations always saying, if compliance is cumbersome, expensive, or a nuisance, then try non-compliance. He starts it. So everybody, before it comes, people start saying, okay, we know what you're going to say. So it starts with that, So I think it's really expensive. Like my colleague said, it's the brand that comes up when it comes to non-compliance, and it's a huge risk, whether it's outsourced employee or whoever it is. It's a huge risk. It just takes 5 minutes to completely blow up your reputation. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, it does. I completely agree with the panelists, sir. And secondly, I would thank all the panelists for this effort and the time and the opportunity that you have given to Legasis. And on behalf of Legasis, thank you so much. Sir. Over to you, Arun, sir.
I just conclude saying that it was a wonderful session, and every one of us learned from everyone, and it was an excellent time with all of you guys. Thank you very much for being there.
Thank you, Arun.
Thank you, Arun.
Thank you, Arun.
Thank you, Anubhav.
Thank you. It's
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We would now like to thank our panelists and Mr. Kulkarni for their time